In the previous video about the Istanbul Colosseum, old maps and drawings were discussed, suggesting that by the late 16th century, the Colosseum was already in a semi-ruined state. About a third of it had been dismantled, and other buildings had begun to grow inside. Interestingly, the Colosseum was far from the only amphitheater in Istanbul that was destroyed. The same 1572 map shows several other Istanbul amphitheaters, all in a state of ruin. Not a single intact amphitheater is depicted on the map. Let's mark the most prominent remains of amphitheaters with numbers. The Colosseum is marked as number 1. Now, let's take a closer look at them. A large, partially ruined amphitheater is shown on the map near the arsenal and the shore of the Sea of Marmara. It is marked as number 2. This amphitheater resembles the Colosseum but is smaller in size. It is possible that this is the same Colosseum mistakenly depicted twice on the map. Notably, just like the Colosseum, a row of columns and obelisks extends from it toward the Hagia Sophia. Between this amphitheater and the Hagia Sophia, we see the ruins of another, much smaller amphitheater. Today, it seems that no trace of it remains. Another small amphitheater, labeled Tempio, which simply means temple in Italian, is drawn slightly above the Colosseum. It is also in ruins, with only half of its oval wall depicted. The next amphitheater is labeled Theatro, meaning theater. It is shown on the map near the Greek Patriarchate, close to the shore of the Golden Horn. This theater is also depicted as partially ruined and has been built over inside. The last amphitheater is particularly interesting. According to the map, one of the oldest Orthodox churches in Istanbul, the Church of the Mother Mary, Mariam and Awe, also known as the Church of Saint Maria of the Mongols, stands on its site today. This church is located exactly where the amphitheater is depicted on the map, near the Constantinople Patriarchate and very close to the shore of the Golden Horn. It is worth noting that the Constantinople Patriarchate changed its location during the period when the 1572 map was created. Therefore, it is unclear whether the map shows its old or new location. However, this is not very significant, as the move was not far, just a little closer to the Golden Horn. The Church of Maria of the Mongols is near the Patriarchate's old location and very close to its new one. It is possible that the current wall surrounding the Church of the Mother Mary partially follows the outlines of the ancient amphitheater. We see that the Istanbul Church of Maria of the Mongols was built on the site of a theater. That is, an ancient church circus from the time of royal Christianity. We will return to the Church of Maria of the Mongols later, as it is very interesting. The 1572 map of Istanbul also shows other remnants of oval walls. These are likely the ruins of ancient Constantinopolitan amphitheaters. All of them are in a state of ruin. Not a single intact amphitheater is depicted on the map. This suggests that the Istanbul Colosseum and other Constantinople amphitheaters were built before the Ottomans, that is, before 1453. After all, if the Ottomans had constructed them themselves, they likely would have preserved them rather than destroyed them. According to the authors of the New Chronology, the Istanbul Colosseum, like all other amphitheaters in the city, was built during the reign of the Byzantine emperors of the House of Palaiologos. Interestingly, the name Palaiologos literally means knowing antiquity. It is well known that the Palaiologi ruled in Constantinople from the late 14th to the first half of the 15th century. Moreover, according to the New Chronology reconstruction, the 15th century Palaiologi were direct descendants of Tsar Khan Dmitry Donskoy, also known as Constantine the Great, who, after the Battle of Kulikovo, moved the capital of the empire from Vladimir Suzdal, Russia to the Bosphorus and built the city of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. His descendants ruled this city until 1453. Then, according to the Fomenko-Nosovsky reconstruction, events unfolded as follows. In the first half of the 15th century, relations between Russia and Constantinople deteriorated and became hostile. War broke out. The Ottomans, who came from Russia and took Constantinople in 1453, had little regard for the ancient amphitheaters and other ancient monuments of Istanbul, which had been built by the Paleologi in the 14th–15th centuries. This was not limited to Istanbul. The Ottomans destroyed antiquity throughout their territories, in the Balkans, Asia Minor, Syria, and beyond. Today, historians present the remains of this destruction as supposedly very, very ancient classical ruins. It is important to emphasize that, according to this reconstruction, the Ottomans who captured Constantinople and founded the Ottoman Empire came from Russia, not from Asia Minor, as modern historians believe. According to the new chronology, the first Ottomans were actually Russian Cossacks. Furthermore, in the 15th century, the primary spoken language of Russia was still Turkic, Tatar, which is why the Ottomans brought it with them to Constantinople. At the same time, they also used the Russian language, preserving it at least until the 17th century. This is directly confirmed by sources such as Dionysius Petavius, one of the founders of modern historical science. In the English translation of his work, published in London in 1659 under the title, The History of the World or an Account of Time, with an appendix providing a geographical description of the world, page 28 of the geographical description contains a passage about 3 Balkan Slavic states, Illyria, Dalmatia, and Croatia. These 3 countries, thus called Slavonia, use their own Slavonian tongue, and is observed to be used by all the Turkish emperors, captains and soldiers. The same is reported by Marco Foscarino, a Venetian nobleman whose manuscript The History of the Muscovite Empire is kept in the Vatican Library. Foscarino writes the following: These Muscovites speak and write the Slavic language, like the Dalmatians, Bohemians, Poles, and Lithuanians. It is said that this language is very widespread and is now very familiar in Constantinople at the Sultan's court, and even in Egypt, at the court of the Sultan of Babylon. It used to be heard among the Mamluks. Thus, in the 15th–17th centuries, not only the Turkish sultans but also the Egyptian Mamluk sultans spoke Slavic. This is not surprising at all. The book Egyptian Album provides detailed information on how the Egyptian Mamluks originated from the Volga region and maintained close ties with Russia for a long time. Furthermore, according to some reports, in the 16th century, all Mamluks were still baptized Christians. In this regard, let us present an old print depicting 3 mounted Mamluks. The faces of all 3 closely resemble those of Russians. The middle Mamluk has a cross on his shield, with Slavic letters, Ye, or S, in the corners. Below the cross, there is a crescent moon. Interestingly, a very similar cross with exactly the same letters, Ye, or S, in the corners can be seen today on the coat of arms of the Slavic state of Serbia. Let us recall that Serbia was part of the Ottoman Empire until the 19th century. All of this suggests that both the Ottomans and the Egyptian Mamluks were originally from Russia and spoke Russian and Tatar, the languages of Russia Horde. In other words, the Turkish language was brought to Turkey, and not only to Turkey, from Russia. The Turkish language is very close to Tatar. Now, let us return to the historical reconstruction of the Colosseum. After the capture of Constantinople in 1453, the Ottomans gradually began dismantling the Colosseum and other amphitheaters in Istanbul. However, the Colosseum was so massive and likely so well built that even by the end of the 16th century, a significant part of it was still standing. Imposing remnants of its walls have survived to this day. This is the previously shown drawing from the Nuremberg Chronicle by Hartmann Schedel, which depicts the Istanbul Colosseum. Let us take another look. The drawing clearly emphasizes that the Colosseum is already in a ruined and abandoned state. The Nuremberg Chronicle is dated 1493, meaning that by that time, the Ottomans had ruled Istanbul for only 40 years since 1453. So, if we trust the dating of the illustrations in Schedel's chronicle, it follows that the Ottomans began destroying the amphitheaters of Constantinople immediately after capturing the city. Columns taken from the Hippodrome were reportedly used by the Ottomans in the construction of the inner courtyard of the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul. A travel guide to Istanbul states, "We find ourselves in the inner courtyard, where 24 columns made of porphyry, marble, and granite support 28 domes. All these columns once stood at the Hippodrome. Since, as we understand, the true Hippodrome is actually the Colosseum, it is most likely that these columns were taken during the dismantling of the Colosseum. It is known that the Süleymaniye Mosque was built on the site of the oldest Sultan's palace, which has not survived to this day. Perhaps the columns were removed from the Hippodrome Colosseum during the construction of this palace. And since this was the very first Sultan's palace, it must have been built very soon after the city's capture in 1453. Earlier, the old Istanbul Church of the Mother Mary of the Mongols was briefly mentioned, along with the idea that it was likely built on the site of an even older church amphitheater. The Church of Mary of the Mongols holds a somewhat unique position among all the churches in Istanbul. It is the only Orthodox church in the city that has never been closed or converted into a mosque. It remained protected by special decrees from Mehmed the Conqueror and other early sultans of Istanbul. The Church of Mary of the Mongols is dedicated to the Virgin Mary. It is believed to have been built on the site of the Theotokos Panaeotissa monastery. Theotokos means Mother of God in Greek. Istanbul guidebooks generally remain completely silent about this church, likely because historians face certain difficulties with it. The main issue lies in the church's very name. It would seem natural to assume that since the church is dedicated to the Mother of God and called the Church of Mother Mary, the Mother Mary in the name refers to the Virgin Mary. However, historians struggle to accept this. The problem is that the Mother Mary to whom the church is dedicated is not just Mary but Mary of the Mongols. Not long ago, the church was known as Saint Mary of the Mongols or Mughals. Naturally, modern historians cannot allow for the possibility that the Virgin Mary was ever called Mary of the Mongols. After all, in their view, the events of the Gospels took place very far from Mongolia and long before Mongolia even appeared on the historical stage. Moreover, according to them, historical Mongolia was located in the Far East, where the modern state of Mongolia is today, an idea that is incorrect. As a result, there is a sharp contradiction between the name of the Church of Mother Mary of the Mongols and the currently accepted version of history. To weaken this contradiction, historians initially attempted to reinterpret the word Mongols, claiming it was a distortion of another, safer term, the name of the settlement Muchilon in Mistra. Later, after reconsideration, historians proposed another explanation. According to them, an illegitimate daughter of a 13th-century Byzantine emperor, named Maria Despina, married a Mongol Khan. After her husband's death, historians continue to fantasize, she supposedly returned to Constantinople, eventually took monastic vows, and became an abbess at a monastery of the Theotokos. Because she had been married to a Mongol, she was nicknamed Maria of the Mongols. Additionally, as a nun, she was also called Mother Maria. They argue that this is how the name Mother Mary of the Mongols originated. Historians enthusiastically claim that the people of Constantinople deeply loved and revered Mother Mary of the Mongols, and eventually, the entire monastery was named after her, changing from the monastery of the Theotokos to the monastery of Mary of the Mongols. Today, all that remains of that monastery is the Church of Mother Mary of the Mongols, which still bears the name of the former monastery. But this explanation does not actually explain anything. First of all, it remains completely unclear how a monastery dedicated to the Mother of God ended up being named after an ordinary nun, one who was not even canonized as a saint. Yet the church's name explicitly includes the word saint. It was called Saint Mary of the Mongols or Mughals. This means that the Mary mentioned in the name was a saint. Maria Despina, even if she actually existed, which is doubtful, was not a saint. Therefore, her name is entirely unsuitable for the church's name. Another suspicious aspect of the historian's explanation is that the main figure in their story is an alleged illegitimate daughter of an emperor. It is easy to invent any story about some illegitimate child of a ruler and then present it as fact. Such a tale would be impossible to disprove, as illegitimate children were usually not recorded in chronicles or official documents. Once repeated enough times, a baseless story gradually turns into an accepted fact, which was likely the intention. The historical reconstruction proposed by the new chronology immediately resolves all these oddities, making everything fall into place. The names Mother Mary and Mary of the Mongols belong to the Virgin Mary herself, not to some obscure nun. It is possible that the Virgin Mary lived at this location for some time, as it is quite close to the Gospel-era Jerusalem, which was actually modern-day Yeros on the Bosphorus. Historians fail to identify Mary of the Mongols with the Virgin Mary only because they rely on an incorrect version of history, which claims that the events of the Gospels supposedly took place far from Istanbul and had no connection to Mongolia, which, in reality, was Russia. Both assumptions are incorrect. As discovered in 2006, the Gospel-era Jerusalem was located on the Bosphorus, near the Black Sea, about 30 kilometers from what would later become Istanbul, Constantinople. The impressive ruins of ancient Jerusalem still stand today. It is still called Yeros Fortress, Yeros Kalesi in Turkish. Since Yeros is close to Istanbul, it is entirely plausible that the Virgin Mary visited or even lived at the future site of the Theotokos Monastery in Constantinople, the city that would later become Istanbul. In the 15th century, this was likely still well remembered. This also explains the special attention the first sultans of Istanbul gave to the Church of Mary of the Mongols. Furthermore, according to the research of the new chronology, the Virgin Mary was originally from Russia, that is, from Mongolia. In this reconstruction, Mongolia was the medieval foreign name for Russia. Therefore, the Virgin Mary could rightfully have been called Mary of the Mongols. Notably, in the Church of Mary of the Mongols in Istanbul, the most prominent image, located under the dome of the altar, is a Russian icon, the icon of Our Lady of the Sign from Veliki Novgorod. This icon is known to be dedicated to Russian events of the 12th century, which, according to the new chronology, corresponds to the time of Christ's advent. The presence of the Russian icon of Our Lady of the Sign in the most significant place within the Church of Mary of the Mongols perfectly aligns with the conclusion that Mary of the Mongols, meaning Mary of Russia, is the Virgin Mary herself. Thus, in the new chronology, all the mysteries surrounding the name of the Church of Mary of the Mongols in Istanbul are resolved. This is the staircase leading to the lower level of the Church of Mary of the Mongols. There, an underground passage begins, which is now blocked, but according to legend, it once ran from the Church of Mary of the Mongols all the way to the Hagia Sophia and the Hippodrome. This is the exterior view of the Church of Saint Mother Mary of the Mongols. Notably, above one of the doors leading into the church, there is an old stone carving of a double-headed eagle. Today, the double-headed eagle is commonly believed to be an exclusively Byzantine symbol. However, according to the reconstruction of the new chronology, the double-headed eagle was actually the insignia of the Great Russian Empire of the 14th–16th centuries. It was brought to Byzantium at the end of the 14th century by Dmitry Donskoy, also known as Constantine the Great.